The Nevada desert still clung to first-light coolness when Fort Westridge's main hangar rolled open, revealing a skeletal fleet of stealth drones midway through overhaul. Fluorescent fixtures buzzed awake, reflecting off composite skins that cost more than suburban neighborhoods. Technicians in gray coveralls checked torque settings, while logistics screens flashed tasks measured in millinewtons and microseconds. Chief Mechanic Blake Rogan, 30 years of turbine grit behind him, strode the center aisle like a foreman on a battleship, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. Blake's rule was simple: precision first, questions later. He greeted engineers with curt nods, issued corrections with the efficiency of a torque gun, and expected the same sharp discipline in return. No one doubted his skill. The man could diagnose an engine imbalance by feel. Yet beneath the hum of productivity lay tension. A critical hydraulic node on Drone X7 had failed 3 days earlier, grounding the prototype and bruising egos clear up the command chain. On this particular morning, Dr. Eli Mathers, lead software architect for the drone's flight control algorithms, arrived flustered, clutching a thumb drive of emergency patches and the small hand of his 10-year-old daughter, Mira. Her presence breached base protocol, but the guard at the gate, recognizing Eli's clearance and reading the worry in his eyes, waved them through with a warning to keep her clear of the active bays. Inside, Eli guided Mira to a bench near the perimeter workstations. "Stay here, Peanut," he murmured, pointing to her backpack of sketchbooks and circuitry trinkets. Mira nodded, but her wide gaze instantly wandered to the labyrinth of machinery. She had grown up beside whirring 3D printers and solder fumes, absorbing her father's passion, the way desert sand soaks sunrise. Sitting still was never her strength, especially when technology called like a siren beneath metal hatches and dangling wiring harnesses. Blake was briefing his team on revised pressure tolerances when he noticed a small figure approaching X7's exposed engine bay. The girl's ponytail bobbed as she knelt to study the failed hydraulic coupler, unafraid of grease smears or the array of caution labels. Blake signaled 2 technicians to pause, then stalked over, boots thumping against concrete. "This zone is restricted," he growled, voice echoing off aluminum spars. Mira glanced up politely. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just observing the cooling manifold. Your bypass line is drawing heat away from the wrong section." Laughter rippled from nearby mechanics. The chief barked louder. "You lost, princess. This isn't a science fair." Mira's cheeks flushed, but her eyes remained steady, scanning the part numbers etched on the valve assembly as if storing them for later. Unbeknownst to Blake, Micra had spent the summer building miniature cooling systems in her father's garage, tweaking flexible heat-sink mesh to optimize airflow across Raspberry Pi clusters. She understood laminar flow diagrams, the way other kids memorized comic book lore. Spotting X7's design flaw felt as natural to her as breathing. While Blake turned to dismiss the interruption, Mira rummaged through her backpack, extracting a thin strip of copper-infused mesh and a tiny torque ring. She stepped forward again, voice soft yet firm. "If you redirect thermal dissipation here," she said, pointing to the coupler flange, "the hydraulic pump won't overheat." Blake's brow knit into disbelief. "Back off before someone gets hurt," he snapped, waving a grease-blackened hand. Technicians smirked, and one whispered, "Kid's got guts." Eli finally looked up from his terminal and saw the unfolding scene. His heart lurched. He dashed over, placing himself between Mira and Blake. "Chief Rogan, apologies. My daughter strayed while I was running diagnostics. She meant no harm." Blake crossed his muscular arms. "Doc, Your kid's giving design lectures. We're juggling million-dollar hardware." Before Eli could reply, Mira extended her improvised heatsink module. "May I demonstrate? It's reversible. No damage." The confidence in her tone, unshaken by scorn, surprised everyone. Blake weighed protocol against desperation. X7's downtime was hemorrhaging budget and prestige. Finally, with a curt nod, he said, 4 minutes. Impress me or step away." Mira fitted the mesh around the coupler, securing it with the torque ring, just shy of manufacturer spec, to allow thermal expansion. She then traced a chalk arrow on the housing, indicating airflow direction. Blake signaled an engineer to run a low-power ground test. The engine whined to life, eyes fixed on diagnostic tablets reflected hope and dread. 30 seconds passed, temperature previously spiking now plateaued. At the 90-second mark, a red warning icon flipped to green. Gasps hung in the air like exhaust plumes. Blake leaned closer to the monitor jaw. Slack. "Impossible," he muttered, then turned to Mira, who simply tucked chalk behind her ear. "It's not impossible," she replied. "You were cooling the housing, not the pump core. Heat needs a path, not a prison." Mechanics gathered, murmuring excitement as the chief rebooted full test parameters. The engine sustained optimal RPM, hydraulics stable. 3-day nightmare solved by a grade schooler in canvas sneakers. Blake exhaled a laugh, this time amazed, not mocking, and removed his oily glove to shake Mira's hand. "Kid, you just salvaged 6 months of prototype schedule." Around them, technicians clapped some whistling admiration. Eli placed a trembling hand on his daughter's shoulder, pride and disbelief dueling behind moist eyes. Mira smiled shyly, wiping graphite from her fingers onto her jeans. "It was just airflow," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. News traveled quicker than turbine spin. By noon, Base Command requested a briefing. By evening, senior engineers drafted notes crediting M. Mathers, age 10, for an innovative passive cooling solution. Official channels couldn't award her a medal, but a private ceremony in the hangar saw the commander present. Her a coin engraved with the unit insignia and the words, "Genius needs no rank." Blake, former skeptic, knelt to Mira's height and offered a fresh pair of safety goggles monogrammed Junior Tech. Laughter and applause erupted once more. An exhausted Eli hugged his daughter tight. "You changed more than an engine today," he whispered, voice cracking. Outside, the desert sky shifted to copper dusk. X7's turbines now purred like content cats, ready for night trials. Mira watched from the hangar door, goggles perched on her head, a breeze tugging at her cap brim. Blake joined her, hands on hips. "I laughed when you walked up," he admitted. "That laugh's on me. If you ever build a jet, I want the first ride." Mira grinned. "Deal!" She turned to leave with her father, the challenge coin heavy in her pocket, unaware that tomorrow's defense meeting would feature her chalk arrow on every slide. Behind her, technicians resumed work with renewed vigor. A young girl's curiosity had reignited their belief that innovation often arrives in unexpected packages, carrying backpacks instead of briefcases, and that even the most elite mechanic can still be stunned into rethinking everything he knows. The following morning, Fort Westridge's Situation Room hummed with an electricity more potent than any generator. Commanders, civilian engineers, and logistics officers filled the oval table where threat assessments normally lived. Today, the screen displayed a paused video of Mira's chalk arrow over the hydraulic coupler. Colonel Hartley, base commander, cleared his throat and addressed the group. A 10-year-old solved our node failure in under 5 minutes. That isn't a public relations anecdote. It's a gap analysis. He motioned for Blake Rogan to brief them. Blake described the passive cooling strip, the precise torque offset, and the immediate temperature stabilization. He used words like laminar pathing and rapid prototyping, terms once too technical for command briefings, now essential. Several officers exchanged glances, realizing maintenance protocols would be rewritten around a child's insight. As the presentation ended, Colonel Hartley spoke again, slower this time. Talent carries no age stamp. Our job is to cultivate it before someone else does. After the meeting, Dr. Eli Mathers was summoned to contracts. The facility's legal officer slid a non-disclosure agreement across polished oak, outlining intellectual property provisions for design. Eli skimmed clauses that guaranteed her recognition while protecting classified schematics. He signed, then asked the inevitable question, "What do you intend to do with my daughter?" The officer smiled, benign yet purposeful. "We'd like her enrolled in our junior STEM embedded program. Weekend sessions only. Strictly educational." Eli hesitated, haunted by the professional world's tendency to exploit raw aptitude. Yet he also knew Mira thrived on challenges large enough to scare grown engineers. He requested a mentor he trusted. Blake. The officer agreed. Later that evening, Eli described the offer over spaghetti at the kitchen table. Mira twirled noodles, eyes shining but careful. "Will I still have time for skateboarding?" she asked. He laughed softly, relieved the question was about balance, not fear. The inaugural Saturday session unfolded inside Hangar C, a decommissioned maintenance bay converted into a makerspace overnight. Workbenches lined the walls, 3D printers hummed near racks of composite sheets. Blake greeted Mira at the door, handing her the new goggles she'd earned. They spent the morning dissecting a carbon fiber duct to illustrate heat dissipation channels. Several teenage dependents of base personnel, some skeptical, others curious, hovered nearby. Blake motioned them over. "Engineering renaissance starts when questions outrank pride," he declared. Mira demonstrated her mesh technique, explaining conductive coefficients in language that made sense to adolescents and adults alike. When she anchored a strip with perfect torque, the teenagers applauded in genuine admiration. Blake noticed their expressions, equal parts surprise and motivation. By lunch, 5 separate project ideas had surfaced: adaptive coolant sleeves, sensor patches, even a concept for silent drone rotors. Mira's presence, it seemed, turned inertia into possibility. Meanwhile, the repaired X-7 drone faced its final test, a live-fire training simulation over restricted desert airspace. Blake, Eli, and Mira watched from the control trailer, where telemetry scrolled like green rainfall across black monitors. As the drone executed evasive maneuvers, coolant temperatures stayed stable within 3 degrees, an unprecedented margin. The mission timer flashed. Success. Applause erupted. Colonel Hartley, witnessing data he once considered improbable, leaned toward Eli. "Your daughter's mesh saved us $4 million in downtime alone," he stated. "We owe her more than a coin." Mira heard and turned crimson, but Blake whispered, "Engineers don't blush. They iterate." The colonel asked what she'd like as recognition. Mira glanced at a battered tool trolley, missing half its sockets. "A fully stocked bench for our workshop," she replied. Hartley grinned. "Granted, and we'll paint your name on it." National press inevitably caught wind of an unnamed child assisting cutting-edge defense repairs. To preempt speculation, Public Affairs released a carefully worded statement. A junior participant in our STEM outreach program contributed to prototype cooling improvements. Reporters still descended on. Rivertown Elementary, where Mira attended 5th grade. Teachers shielded her from cameras, but peers now regarded her with a mix of awe and territorial pride. On the playground, one classmate asked if she'd really flown a drone solo. Mira shook her head. "I just cooled its heart so it could fly itself." The answer spread like wildfire, evolving into legend. PTA meetings began fundraising for a school makerspace, citing Mira's breakthrough as proof practical science invigorates imagination. Eli watched from the sidelines, realizing his daughter's spark had set off a chain reaction well beyond military hangars. Corporate defense contractors, alert to any innovation leak, requested demonstrations. Colonel Hartley declined politely. Security protocols prohibited external showcases. Instead, he organized an internal innovation day, pairing base personnel with junior program participants. Mira presented alongside Blake, detailing her design's scalability. Midway through, a seasoned aerospace consultant interrupted. "Why didn't anyone on the design team propose this mesh earlier?" Blake answered before Mira could. "Because adults sometimes forget to ask naive questions." The consultant nodded, chastened. Attendees left with re-energized respect for fresh perspectives. Behind closed doors, research budgets realigned to explore passive cooling across all upcoming airframes. Mira's name appeared in internal memos, not as a footnote, but as a co-inventor. Though she couldn't yet sign patents legally, provisional documents listed Morgan cooling method in anticipation of her 18th birthday. One evening, after a marathon session welding a prototype sleeve, Blake offered to walk Mira and Eli to their car. They paused beneath sodium lights, desert wind carrying hints of sage. Blake cleared his throat. "You made me realize experience can calcify as quickly as it can strengthen," he confessed. I laughed because it was easier than admitting I'd missed the obvious. Mira smiled. Discovery belongs to whoever asks the right why, not the loudest how. Eli thanked Blake for mentoring, acknowledging that respect from seasoned professionals mattered as much as scientific validation. Blake waved it off. "She's mentoring us." They parted ways, headlights carving paths through the dark base roads. Mira stared out the window, mentally rewriting the day's data into her notebook of future projects. Months later, Drone X-8, an advanced variant incorporating Mira's mesh in its original design, rolled onto the tarmac. The event drew senators, defense analysts, and a handful of schoolchildren. Mira, still wearing her oversized goggles, stood beside Blake as the drone lifted smoothly into dawn's pastel sky. Telemetry projected on a giant screen showed stable temperatures at every throttle setting. The colonel led applause, then presented Mira with a framed schematic titled, "First Flight, Morgan Method Integrated." She traced the lines with her finger, understanding that inventions are waypoints, not destinations. Journalists asked what she wanted to be when she grew up. She shrugged. "Still curious," she replied, a simple answer that reminded everyone genius often hides in understatement. That night, Eli found Mira asleep at her desk, head on schematics, lamp still glowing. He draped a blanket over her shoulders and noticed a new sketch, a reimagined coolant ring annotated with measurements he didn't yet recognize. He smiled, switched off the lamp, and whispered, "Rest, engineer." Outside, hangar lights dimmed one by one, but Fort Westridge pulsed with a quiet revolution. Senior officers no longer questioned weekend maker sessions. Technicians quoted Mira's airflow ratios as standard practice, and Blake logged fewer overtime hours solving crises because the next wave of problem solvers was already oiling the gears of innovation. Somewhere in that stillness, a once skeptical mechanic reflected on a single chalk arrow that rewrote doctrine, and on a 10-year-old whose simple curiosity reminded an elite base that progress often arrives wearing sneakers and a backpack full of questions.